a pair of Missouri true freshmen steal the show during Saturday's scrimmage, and one of them, I have to admit, I did not see coming.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hail, you true sons and daughters. I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And later on the program, I'm going to talk about why the quarterback and left tackle battles seem to be continuing unabated here, at least officially. And by the way, just everything I said about Ethan Taylor in my previous episode, we can go ahead and just throw that out the window at this point. So we'll talk a little Tiger basketball on the program as well. Also want to quickly remind you today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first ticket purchase. And I have to admit, when I first heard about Daeden Hopkins last season, the true freshman defensive end from Hermann, Missouri, by the way, 6'6", 237 pounds. Hermann, a place that I think most of you have heard of. Many of you have visited, but maybe a fewer than many of you actually remember having been there. But enough with that. We're talking about Daeden Hopkins here because this is a young man, again, at 6'6", 237. I thought he had all of the physical ability in the world. But just at that size, I figured it's going to take him maybe a year or two to get up to SEC snuff. Well, this is why I don't focus on high school recruiting, people. Not only because it's not my forte, but because it's really, really hard. Trying to compare, quite frankly, for the people who play against Hermann in Missouri high school, it's not exactly Cocoa, Florida, for example, where several Missouri high school players have come from and recruits lately, including Javion Hilson. But regardless, Daeden Hopkins is showing out against SEC opponents, well, at least his own teammates so far, especially in yesterday's scrimmage. Eli Drinkwitz said, quote, Daeden Hopkins, the way he played today, he's going to play himself into a role real quick. That was impressive stuff today. Daeden felt like he was in our backfield pretty much all day with his group reps. And he continued later to say, we don't just play 11 guys on defense. We play with 20 to 25 if we're really playing game day defense. And I think we've got the ability. I feel strongly about 18 players right now. Daeden Hopkins, the way he played today, he's going to play himself into a role real quick. That was impressive stuff today. Daeden felt like he was in our backfield pretty much all day once again. So anytime you can get any defensive lineman getting into the backfield, yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is a good thing. That is popping, especially for a true freshman. Man, it's going to be a little bit ironic when he probably ends up being a more productive player than Williams-Nwaneri. That is for darn sure. But another true freshman who apparently stood out in the scrimmage was less surprising. Marquise Davis is a guy I've talked a decent bit about this offseason as somebody I thought who had a good shot to play as a true freshman. The 6 feet tall, 200-pound running back. Recently, Toriano Pride, a Missouri cornerback, said that no one person is likely to be able to bring Marquise Davis down by himself. And Drinkwitz said, well, really thought he stole the show with his effectiveness running the football today. In fact, it seemed like, well, Missouri, from the reporting I saw, that Missouri ran the ball okay to the outside with its usual outside zone attack. But when trying to run the ball through the middle of the field, well, it was tough sledding for anybody really but the physical Marquise Davis. So I could definitely see him being a short yardage specialist maybe at time. As effective as I think Ahmad Hardy is going to be, he's not the biggest guy in the world. He's more Nate Noel and Cody Schrader sized. Although I should point out, of course, that Cody Schrader was an effective short yardage running back. So it's not always about size, but at the same time, you do want to manage Ahmad Hardy's load to some extent, just like you do every lead running back, especially in an Eli Drinkwitz offense. He typically likes to lean on those types of one running backs more often than not anyway. And to that point, well, in yesterday's scrimmage, Ahmad Hardy did not play, and he got the DNP coach's decision designation along with 5 other veteran players: Connor Tollison, the center, a couple defensive ends, Zion Young and Damon Wilson, also linebacker Josiah Trotter and safety Jalen Catalon were all held out of Saturday's scrimmage. Now, what all of those names have in common, with the possible exception of Connor Tollison, is they don't have any injury concerns whatsoever, at least none that I'm aware of. So what that really tells me is that Ahmad Hardy is basically a sure thing to be Missouri's number 1 bell cow running back, at least to start off the season. And look for a ton of Zion Young, of course, as you saw last season, Damon Wilson as well, Jalen Catalon, who's played a ton of college football so far, and Josiah Trotter, who played a lot last season. But again, I think just a guy that almost everybody assumes is going to be a staple of this Missouri defense. And speaking of that Missouri defense, by the way, well, Drinkwitz mentioned that they can maybe look to play as many as 20 to 25 guys, and he feels really good about 18 of them right now. Well, 3 of those guys apparently are 3 cornerbacks. He mentioned Stephen Hall, Toriano Pride, and Dre Norwood as basically being, in Drinkwitz's mind, all 3 are starters. So not a ton of separation there. I'll talk a little bit maybe about the lack of separation also between the quarterbacks and the left tackles here in just a little bit. But to that point, if Missouri has 3 cornerbacks, I think they've probably got 3 linebackers, maybe 4 that they'll play as well. But let's just say conservatively, they'll play 3 linebackers, I think. Then at the safety position, maybe they'll play 4 or 5. Well, there's 11 guys right there. So that means maybe as many as 9 to 14 defensive linemen could see action for Missouri. That strikes me as a little bit high and maybe a little bit of an exaggeration on Drinkwitz's part. Don't get me wrong. I think certainly in week 1, you'll see a whole bunch of guys play against Central Arkansas. But against Kansas, I think 18, the other number that Drinkwitz threw out there that he feels good about right now, I think that's a much more realistic number. And Eli Drinkwitz likes to use the word separation when discussing the Missouri quarterback position, looking for some of it. Well, let's also talk about that and the left tackle position, whether there's been any separation there at what some would say is the second most important position on the field, at least offensively. So let's get there in just a second. First, though, I want to talk to you about Gametime, and we've all been there logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets, event tickets, baseball tickets to go on sale, only for you to lose your spot for an event you've been dying to see. Well, it shouldn't be this complicated, and that's where Gametime comes in. And you know what? I've got something even better for you. Are you tired of endless scrolling to find the best seats? Well, Gametime's Zone Deals picks give you the best seats, especially with the best prices if you're not picky. Basically, think if you want to sit behind the plate. Right now, the St. Louis Cardinals playing tonight, Monday, against the Colorado Rockies, for example. If you want to sit in one of those behind-the-plate sections, well, you might pay as much as $70 for a specific seat. But if you're not that picky, well, you can be guaranteed a spot in one of 5 to 6 sections, let's say, for $28 right now. That's a heck of a deal per per ticket, and it includes fees as well. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So I've talked so much about the quarterback position for Missouri. I don't want to go on and on about it today, but just a quick update here. Drinkwitz on the quarterback says, quote, was really looking to see if we had some separation today, and I honestly just didn't see it. They're both playing really good football right now, so we'll go into next week and keep the battle going. From my perspective, I once again, for your everydayers, I don't want this to get boring, but I apologize because there are new listeners to this program all the time, fortunately for me. But the thing is, if I could bet on something, I'm just really getting deja vu from 2023, those first couple weeks of the season, the Brady Cook Sam Horn battle. If I could put money on one thing and parlay it with another thing, it would be this. It would be, I think Beau Pribula is going to start week 1, and then I think Sam Horn is going to start the second half of week 1 against Central Arkansas for Missouri, just like the Tigers did a couple years ago against South Dakota. So, and then here's the other half of it. Parlay it with, then in week 2, say Monday, that kind of deal, I think Missouri will name Beau Pribula as the starting quarterback. That's just my prediction. If I could put money down on that over at FanDuel Sportsbook, I would. But, again, quarterback, not the only important position on the field. Left tackle, a heck of an important one, too, no matter where you think it goes down in the pecking order. And Drinkwitz was asked directly, has Javen Richardson won the starting job at left tackle? And he said, no, we're going to make a change next week and see. We're going to make some adjustments next week and see if we can't find, the goal is to get the best 5. So we've got 2 more weeks to get there, and so on next week, we'll make a change, and we want to see if we've got a different starting 5 next week and see what it looks like. So specifically there to the idea that they're going to change next week. Well, that change specifically is Johnny Williams, the transfer from West Virginia. He's going to get his shot and his week, I suppose, to start with the number 1 offense. The rest of the number 1s, the quarterbacks, the receivers, the offensive line, most importantly, possibly of all. So that's a real evaluation period there. So next week going to be huge, I think, for the left tackle position, and I think there's a much better chance that we might actually see a left tackle named as a starter before week 1. Again, at this point, don't really see it happening with quarterback. Do think it could happen with left tackle, though. Similarly, I'm not totally sure what the upside necessarily is. And you know what? This episode of Locked On Mizzou is going to be released Monday morning, a few hours before the first edition of the preseason Associated Press Top 25 is released. And I, like my colleague Chris Marler over at Locked On Gamecocks, does not think Missouri is going to be ranked. But like Marler, I think that's a mistake. And here's what Marler said at one of his other gigs over at LouisianaSports.net. Marler says, quote, Missouri not being ranked Monday will be as maddening as it is real. The national media continue to sleep on this team despite the talent they brought in the portal and winning 10 or more games in back-to-back seasons. And I think that's really 2 excellent points piled on top of each other, which is, well, the Tigers, while I think the national media and maybe even the perception among Tiger fans right now is that last year was a slight letdown, my goodness, I think another way to look at it is, well, really Missouri followed up on what was their breakout season with another really good season. Was it as good as 2023? No, it was not, but that's a really high bar to clear. It would have felt a lot different if Missouri would have went 6-6 last season. I think we can all agree with that. But then the second point there is that Missouri, by all accounts, by the people who really follow this stuff closely, brought in one of the best portal classes in the entire country. Now, the consensus is LSU was number one, basically far and away as far as a portal class goes in this particular offseason. But once again, I think everybody has Missouri, as Marler said there, as a top 10 type of portal class. So I do think, to be fair to the national media, and believe me, I say this as somebody who, I don't consider myself national media, obviously. I'm much closer to a local media podcaster, if you want to call it that. But the point here is I follow Missouri incredibly closely, try to mine for all of the nuggets and opinions and bits of information that I can. And I try to follow the SEC as closely as I can too, but there's a real difference between my knowledge of Missouri and the knowledge of the rest of the SEC. And then, boy, it really falls off a cliff once you get past the rest of the SEC. I have to be honest with you. I'm a guy who has a lot of different interests outside of just college football, and a lot of them are other sports as well, as you can probably tell by my hat if you're watching on YouTube. But the point here is that I think Missouri, if it's just really easy for the national media to be dismissive of Missouri when, okay, maybe they were a little bit disappointing compared to our expectations last season. And, well, now Brady Cook's gone as well. They're breaking in a new quarterback. It's Penn State's backup, or it's Sam Horn, a guy who, wow, we'd be really excited about maybe if he were a redshirt freshman and had the exact high school rankings, versus a guy who's, well, been around for a minute through no fault of his own in some ways. Of course, Sam Horn has had injuries on the baseball diamond that have affected his football career. And my point here is, I think, just human nature-wise, I think people are more excited about the brand new toy that hasn't had a chance to already not win the quarterback job a couple times versus the true freshman or redshirt freshman who was a top 100 type of player. Again, similar ranking to what Horn would have been. My point here is, I think if Missouri simply had a returning quarterback, really, I think the national media would be probably on to the scent that, oh, actually, this is a real sleeper team, and maybe people are. I think the Tigers probably would be a popular pick as a sleeper for a college football playoff berth. So, again, the line between not only success and failure can be so slim at times in the SEC especially, but even the perception preseason-wise can be the difference between a name quarterback and somebody that, well, is a bit of an unknown. And after just spending quite a bit of time talking about Link Academy's Ethan Taylor, the center, again, from Branson, Missouri's Link Academy there, well, of course, he puts out his final six, and shockingly to me anyway, Missouri does not make the cut for his final six. But you know what? I'm going to take a positive spin on this one, because I think this could actually make Dennis Gates' high-quality problem a little more tenable. Plus, I want to talk about Cody Schrader and Brady Cook's weekends in the NFL right after these quick words. So as I said on that Friday show, by the way, I tend not to do scouting reports, especially of any deep significance or any real rigor, until those said high school players actually at least commit to Missouri. So bully for me as that particular policy paid off. Ethan Taylor, buddy, it was fun while it lasted, but Missouri did not make the final cut for his final 6 schools. Kansas did, notably, by the way, but still not getting the idea, at least from Derek Nicholson, that maybe he's a Kansas lean. Regardless, Missouri's out, so you know what? We're done with talking about Ethan Taylor. The good news here is that Missouri is on plenty of players, including his own teammate, Tristan Reed, also of Link Academy in Branson. Well, again, the high-quality problem that I thought Dennis Gates might have had, maybe having not enough spots for too many high-quality players, including Jason Crow Jr., of course. Well, it just seems like this is all probably going to work itself out one way or the other to me, with Missouri having one of its best high school classes ranked ever. And hopefully, in terms of production, it truly will be the best ever. Of course, we shall see. But again, Ethan Taylor, it was fun while it lasted, pal. But you know what? We're going to move on and talk a little preseason football, as Cody Schrader had a really nice game for the Los Angeles Rams this past weekend, as he was Pro Football Focus, by the way. They do their individual grades every game in the NFL. Well, he was PFF's second highest graded offensive player on the Rams this most recent game, despite only playing 6 snaps, by the way. 5 carries he had, forced 4 missed tackles on those 5 carries, and accumulated 36 yards after contact. So limited opportunities there for Cody, but man, he really made the best of them, and also caught what looked like on an angle route out of the backfield. Either way, caught a 9-yard touchdown pass too as well. So first time getting into the end zone as an NFL player for Cody Schrader, I believe, as well. So the question is, did he earn some more looks? Is he moving up the depth chart? How's it going to go these last couple of exhibition games, which will indeed be key for Cody Schrader? It looks like the Rams might want to give some more rest to Blake Corum and Jarquez Hunter. So could he maybe be the 4th running back on this roster? If so, I think he at least makes the team as a practice squad running back at the very least. The problem is, he's going to have to make noise on special teams. That's all there is to it. With limited rosters in the NFL, I think for Cody to stick, man, ironically, it's almost going to be as much about his tackling as it's going to be about his ability to run the football. But hopefully Cody can make it one of, obviously, I think everybody's favorite Tigers of recent years. But also, Brady Cook had a decent showing for the Jets as well, I felt like. 6 of 8 for 62 yards. Unfortunately, well, Adrian Martinez, the former Kansas State Wildcat, looks like he and Cook are competing for that number 3 job, had flashier numbers anyway in the second half, threw for 152 yards and a touchdown. By the way, Martinez was the 2004 UFL MVP for whatever in the heck that is worth. Just thought that was an interesting note. And maybe one more interesting note, too. I just thought it was interesting that regarding Luther Burden III, their new head coach, the Chicago Bears' new head coach, I should say, Ben Johnson, formerly the Lions offensive coordinator, well, he singled out Burden as being just an incredibly hard worker and preparer so far in his young career. So, I don't know, once again, that seems to go counter to this idea that Luther Burden was some kind of, I don't know, attitude problem or character problem, whatever you want, whatever phrase you want to use there. I don't know, all off season leading into the draft, I just felt like that entire narrative was maybe cooked up a little bit. No pun intended there, since we were just talking about Brady, but I just never bought into that idea. And to me, sure looks like and sounds like the Bears are pretty happy with their investment early in the second round so far. We'll obviously have to see when the real games begin. And obviously, hey, rookie receivers can go through a bit of a transition, but I think it helps that obviously the Bears have a very offensive-minded coach. A lot of it's going to come down to their second-year quarterback, Caleb Williams. It seems like this may be make or break for him. But you know what? Hey, thanks as always for listening to Locked On Mizzou. today. And if you've listening to this show, there's a good chance you've already heard whether or not Missouri is ranked in the AP poll. I'm anticipating that they are not going to be in there. Hey, I could be wrong. It's happened before. They were pretty close in the coaches poll, so we'll see what happens. I'll talk about it on Tuesday's program, of course, right here on Locked On Mizzou.